The Richard Lewis Esports Podcast. Taking you behind the scenes of the esports industry.
Hello and welcome to the Richard Lewis Esports Podcast. And we're going to get straight into it. I usually do long-winded introductions. Not today because time is at a premium. And I want to spend as much time talking to my guest as possible because, as I just referred to him in the build-up to this, he is a true emperor in esports, an absolute, one of the founding fathers, I think it would be appropriate to describe him as. A true great. It is the Complexity owner, manager, and all-round great guy, Jason Lake. How are you doing, Jason?
Oh, fantastic, Richard. I'm glad to be here, and thanks for the very flattering introduction.
Hey, man, like I say, I think anyone who's listening to this right now will have, they'll if they go back far enough, they'll have a Jason Lake memory. Everybody does. So I guess that's the good jump-off point. I mean, right, when you got into esports way back in the day, I still find it, like, you, for me, were not the ideal candidate to be an esports personality because you were successful in other areas, right? Like, if that sounds, right. Everyone else was kind of like, we were gamers, we were kind of a little bit, immature for our age. I was a student for like 5 years, I didn't graduate at the appropriate time. I just wanted to stay in the little gaming fantasy bubble for as long as possible. But, you were a lawyer, you were a successful guy. And there you were, running one of the most successful pioneering esports organizations. So how in the hell did that happen?
I guess it was really spawned from two things. Number one, deep love of gaming. I grew up a gamer, Ataris and Apples and Segas. And I mean, everything way back in the day was my cup of tea. I'd always loved gaming. And, I did kind of wander from it during my college and law school years just because there was way too many other things going on, to sit and play games at that time. But after law school, I took some time off and traveled and just kind of bummed around and caught my breath. And at that time is when I first discovered Half-Life and Counter-Strike, and I kind of rekindled the love of gaming. And the second thing I think is just a deep vein of competitiveness that I've always had. I originally started Complexity because I was just playing on teams myself and got irritated that they weren't competitive enough. They didn't show up to practice. They weren't pissed off enough if we lost. They weren't excited enough if we won. So I said, you know what, screw this. I'm going to make my own team just with the mentality of I want cool, hardworking people to play with myself.
Yeah.
And then as I learned more and more about esports as it was at the time, my competitive side just kind of took over, and I started hiring better players, and I benched myself, and it was just a Counter-Strike enterprise back then. And next thing you know, I've got a website, and I got a couple of people to run the website, and I guess as they say, the rest is history. But it was just based on a love of gaming and probably being a little too competitive for my own common sense and well-being that kind of catapulted me into esports, you could say.
So, I mean, I'm not, the one thing I definitely can't give a chronology of is kind of like your family life. So at that point where you started Complexity, what was the Jason Lake family situation? Were you married? Were there kids?
I was married already when Complexity was first formed, and my daughter was born shortly thereafter. Our first kind of movie or documentary or whatever you want to call it was called Complexity Redemption. And if you scroll all the way to the end of the credits and so on and so forth, you'll see me holding my daughter, who's now 10 years old and like running around with an iPhone. So that's a little scary. But yeah, so I was newly married kind of when Complexity was given birth. It was kind of my first child in chronological order. And then my daughter was born. And then 2 years later, my son was born. So, got to be the whole family man situation. And kind of fast forwarding a little bit, I guess you could say, having a family's definitely changed my availability in esports.
Yeah.
for a couple years, I was running the law firm. We had 5 locations around Metro Atlanta. I was doing complexity. So I was working, exorbitant hours during the daytime, and I'd come home, work on complexity at night, and then many weekends I was on the road because I traveled quite a bit back in those days. There really came a moment in my life where it was Christmas time, and I had literally barely seen my children the entire month of December because we had events in LA, event in Dallas, event in New York, and I was working during, the normal work week. And it was like Christmas Eve, and it just hit me that I hadn't seen my kids, and I'd missed all the decorating the tree, and I'd missed all these times, and it was kind of like a light bulb moment in my life where I had to decide, was chasing after the complexity dream, was chasing after millions of dollars going to be my identity? Was it going to be what I dedicated my life to, or was it going to be other things as, being there for those moments and going to those basketball games or going to those dance recitals? And then and there I decided it was going to be the latter. And I didn't want to go to my deathbed someday in the future with mountains of money like Breaking Bad and even like this gargantuan global esports organization, only to have my kids look at me and be like, "We don't really know who you are,"
Yeah. Well, what about the missus? I mean, was she? Because right, okay. So here's the situation. I've been with my girlfriend now. It's coming up to 4 years. It's not comparable to marriage, but we do live together. And she thinks this is so fucking weird, and I don't think she gets it sometimes. Like when I'm getting out of bed at like 3 a.m. because someone's messaged me on Skype, like, Richard, dude, you gotta totally hear about this like non-important roster change in League of Legends, like, and she doesn't get like why I'm doing that, or why Saturday night we can't go out because I've agreed to go on some fucking streaming show or something. She supports it. She supports what I do, but I don't think she really gets it. So what was it like with the wife? I mean, was she supportive?
It was very, very similar to what you just described. She didn't get it at all. She thought it was definitely weird. I would have, young guys like Bullseye back in the day. There's a name most of your listeners probably won't remember. That were working for me and stopping by the house and helping with the website and just, kind of bringing a younger. So she's like, why is this 20-year-old dude keep coming over and hanging out? Why did you buy him a motorcycle as a signing bonus? And it's kind of, she thought I was a little nuts, but, she was supportive and, not without good reason. By that time we'd been married, I built and expanded a law firm in a very short period of time. And we were very blessed and doing very well. So when I told her, I really think this esports is going to be something huge someday, and I want to be involved in it. I want to contribute to it, and I want to help build this thing. She thought it was weird, but she definitely was supportive about it. It was funny because years later we'd moved to California, and we went to her class reunion at a hotel down in Hollywood, and at the end of the evening we walked out and we were waiting for valet to get the car, and some guy walks up and he's like, "I'm sorry to bother you, but are you Jason Lake from Complexity?" Like in the middle of Hollywood, and my wife's face just like, after all these years and years, she'd kind of seen it up close.
Validation.
Yeah, and like the most bizarre place, like who the hell is going to know an esports personality in the middle of Hollywood? And it was kind of funny. I think that was kind of the moment the light bulb turned on for her. Like, this is no little just weird niche hobby. Like, this thing is really kind of starting to get some traction.
So, complexity. I got to ask 2 important questions here. Who came up with the name, and who came up with the idea to have a capital L?
It's funny. Back when I very first started the team, and I was still playing, I was playing with a guy named Paolo Bergantino. I'm probably saying his last name wrong. From Miami. His gamer tag was Yoshi. So in the very early days, it was me and him. We were going to build this team, and we were trying to come up with ideas for a name. And out of the blue, he came to me and said a friend of mine at school suggested the word complexity, except you capitalize the middle L instead of the C, and then the tag is COL. And I thought, I love that word. I love what it stands for. I think it's a great brand name. And so I'm like, let's go with it. Only like 2 years later did I put the connection together where there was an old Counter-Strike team that I frankly hadn't even heard of when I named Complexity called Eolithic. And they started with a small E and a capital L. So I think that's why his friend suggested the small C and capital L. But I didn't even put the 2 and 2 together for like a couple of years. But
did you ever track down that guy and make him like a partner or anything? Or the school guy suggested it? Like, he's not going to come at you after this and be due a royalty check or anything, is he?
No, man, I don't even have any idea who it was. It was like Yoshi and I were brainstorming, and he's like a buddy of mine. He came up with this idea. What do you think of it? I wouldn't even know who it was today. It's funny. He probably wouldn't either.
So, okay, what about the law firm? I've always been super curious about this because the only thing I really know about law and like how it actually works in the States is like, movies. Like fucking Al Pacino in Justice for All. You're out of order. Like that's kind of like how I envision it. But actually having, grown up a little bit and talked to a few lawyers, apparently it's not that interesting. You're such a, fiery and passionate character. What were you like in the courtroom? Like, talk me through what it was you did.
Funny. I've actually been told many times over the years I should have been in a courtroom, but the truth of the matter is I never stepped foot in a courtroom. Right. In college, I got a finance degree and, worked my tail off and was fortunate enough to graduate first in my class at Iowa State University. From there, I was either going to get an MBA, a graduate degree in business, or I was going to go to law school. But either way, I knew I wanted to be in business. Ever since I was a young child, I was the kid on the corner with the lemonade stands. I was spending summer camps at business camps and leadership camps, and business has always kind of been my thing. When I was in high school, I ran a business throwing dances. Mm-hmm. I'd usually rent out roller rinks. Because back then, roller skating was a really big deal, and every town had a roller rink. So I'd rent them out and charge like $5 a head, and then advertise the heck out of it, and bring in 5, 6, 7, 800 people, and have these giant dance parties. It wasn't alcoholic or anything. I mean, it was high school kids. But there wasn't a hell of a lot to do in the cornfields of Iowa, so I had a pretty good business, and I was making $2,500 a night. And back then, that was actually quite a bit of money for a high school kid. So I always knew I wanted to go into business. So after law school, I was looking around for business opportunities, and this was about the time real estate in America was just on a meteoric rise. It was going gangbusters, obviously, before the huge crash in 2008. Yeah. So I saw a business opportunity to get into the real estate side of things while it was taking off and make profits off it, doing legal work in what are called closings in America. If you buy a house, in certain states, you need a lawyer to do all the work.
Right.
You do a refinance of your mortgage, you get a new mortgage, you need a lawyer to do all the work. You check the title on the property, check against liens, issue title insurance, do a whole bunch of different things. But what it becomes basically is kind of like a factory. You're taking orders in the front door, doing all the legal work. At the end of the process, you actually bring all the people in your office, sit down, do all the signing and paperwork, and then, deal with the bank on and filing the legal documents on the back end. So it's kind of a factory. You go out and you sell your services. You run the widgets through a factory, and it can be pretty lucrative up to $1,000, $1,500 a pop. So if you're doing 150, 200 of those across 5 offices with minimal staffing and overhead, you can be doing pretty well.
Yeah.
It's definitely not the kind of law that you see and you think, objection, Your Honor. And stuff.
Yeah, there's not been any movies about that one starring, Al Pacino or Robert De Niro or Dustin Hoffman. Yeah,
exactly. And I've always been much more into business. See, that's why as soon as I kind of got a little overly competitive with the esports thing, maybe even to justify my investment and my time spent in the space, I did look at it as a business early on. And I've always considered myself more of a businessman and entrepreneur than a lawyer. I wanted the legal education. for sure. And it is invaluable in business because in America, especially, you can't walk at the square inch in business without having some law touching on it. So it has been valuable. But when people say, "Oh, you're a lawyer," it's like technically I have a law degree, but I've always kind of considered myself more of a business person.
So here's the thing: when you say it like that, and you say, "Oh, you're an entrepreneur, a business person," which is undoubtedly true. I still find that hard to equate to the guy that I used to see stood behind Counter-Strike teams, screaming, really getting fired up, bring me the pistols, all of this classic Jason Lake moments. And even though that you're a competitive guy internally, there's still so few people that could have done that and actually been that embodiment of that kind of almost like sporting passion. So did that just come naturally? Was a little bit of it maybe some sort of shtick you wanted to show how serious you were, or was it did you just find yourself doing it?
To be honest with you, it was never a shtick. It was more of it did occur to me while for my age I'm kind of looking like a dumbass. I just didn't care.
Yeah,
I definitely have a certain part of me that, within reason, I just don't care what people think. Yeah. And that enables me to take some more risks and to be myself more often than people who are really concerned about others' opinions. And everybody's concerned to some level, but my concern level is very low. And it really, I think, originates that's how I kind of do everything in life, is kind of full tilt. And I've always been a very passionate person, and I was very serious about football, American football, and playing football when I was younger. I would spend summers training 12 hours a day to get ready for football seasons, and that passion that you saw there is very much what I brought to football. Heck, I would get warnings to get thrown out of games before the game even started, because I'd be over on the other sideline, like pushing around their star players to try to intimidate them before the game. That's just the way I am when I go to my son's little junior, 8-year-old basketball games. If he does something good, I'm the guy standing up and screaming so loud the whole gym can hear me. My wife is like hiding her face in her hands, and that's just kind of the way I am. And I'd invested so much, and really, not only financially, but invested so much of myself and my life into that Counter-Strike team that by the time 2004 came, I felt whether or not it was true, I felt that I had so much in the line, and these guys had so much in the line, and we had gone through so much kind of flaming and hatred and trolling, and so many people were, "Oh, you're just trying to buy this and that," and we tried to encapsulate that in the Redemption documentary. But everything you saw was 100% real, and you can ask the guys. Behind closed doors, it was just as passionate, and some of that has definitely worn off with age. When I go to events today, sure, I'm still going to cheer, but I'm just not up there kicking chairs and just sweating and bleeding with every play that goes on. I guess, like wine, you kind of mellow a little bit with age, and that's kind of where I'm at in this stage of my life. But back then, that was just how I rolled, and it was real and it was sincere.
So, were you aware when you were doing it that you would sort of inspire a generation of what I like to call the Jason fakes? I was definitely one of them. I remember when I had my first Counter-Strike team back in 2006, I think, when I first managed an organization. And I used to fucking stand behind them, and I used to shout. I even thought about the shirt and tie, but I've never really looked good in one of those. You definitely pulled it off way better than me. But I used to do that. Like, seriously, I used to think, let's get them fired up. And I didn't give a fuck what anybody thought. I was like, if people, want to mock me, then that's fine. Like, this is going to fire up my boys, and maybe we get the W, and that's all that matters, getting the win, right? So, did you think, were you conscious because you were so high profile and complexity was so high profile, you were like, actually, this behavior, it will be replicated, Like, it's just natural that when people, are shown to be at the very top and they behave a certain way, people want to emulate that behavior because they associate it with the success.
It didn't even occur to me at all. You got to realize this is 2004 and things were very different. And the only lands that I'd even seen before attending that CPL, for the most part, there wasn't even somebody standing behind the players at all. So when I went in, like I said, it was genuine passion. It was me trying to light a fire in the belly of my players to make them rise above their considerable skill levels and accomplish something special. The only thoughts that came in my head, during downtimes and smoke breaks was, wow, people are going to think I'm really friggin' nuts, but I just didn't care. It never occurred to me that there might be some mimicking type of behavior until quite a while later when I was at a LAN and I started to see these kind of coaches and guys show up behind their players and people would poke me and be like, look, that guy's trying to be you. And I just kind of laughed. Wow, that's weird. But no, at the time in 2004, it never even crossed my mind. It was not for the cameras. It was not for show. It was not to be mimicked. It was between me and the guys and this old coach football player mentality of mine where I couldn't touch the mouse. I couldn't touch the keyboard. And I just wanted to do anything I could to kind of make them rise to the occasion and really bring their A games. And then definitely created a life of its own over time.
Did any players ever hate that approach? Because I've had that as well. Well, like some guys are like, I can't kind of focus when, you're there. It actually it makes me too nervous, or it puts me off, or I think it's dumb, so please don't do it. Did any players?
Yeah, I've had players over the years since then say, I'm trying to concentrate, you just keep it down, and I'll absolutely honor that. The original guys, when I first started standing behind video game players, Fraud Warden, Storm Trip, and Bullseye Beck, all those guys, they loved it. They're like, this, it just kind of brings an energy to the table. That's a little different. At least that's what they told me. Maybe behind closed doors, they were just like, I wish you'd shut up. But that's what they told me. And, back in 2004, I would have had a hard time being quiet even if they asked me to anyway. So it probably wouldn't have mattered.
So you've built up this brand. It's, it's one of the biggest in North American esports and indeed in esports history. I want to fast forward from where we are in the story to the glory days of CGS, the Championship Gaming Series. Now, one of the things that always perplexed me was why this brand that you had literally built up, and you'd even referred to it as one of your own children, your first child, in fact, just in the course of this podcast. So when CGS said we want to buy the Complexity brand, I don't know why you would have sold that to somebody else. I mean, I'm sure it was very lucrative, but I mean, was there any apprehensions? Was it like a real gut-wrenching feeling, or was it just, this is the payoff, this is why you build a brand?
Yeah, no, it was very difficult emotionally, but it was not difficult at all intellectually. Back in, I guess around 06, 07, when a lot of this was coming around, I'd met with the DirecTV and the News Corp folks a bunch of times, and it was quite apparent that they had the budget and the bankroll to come in and create the global league that everybody had been kind of, chatting about since I'd been in esports at least. And the plan they had in place sounded initially to be a winner. Absolutely did. It did all the way up. I can tell you that story a little later, but it did all the way up until, we were live and filming. The way I looked at it was, I could be stubborn and keep this brand to myself. But at the time, we had different players, but the Counter-Strike team was by far in a way the most important and by far in a way kind of the biggest game in esports at the time. And there's no way I could financially compete with what they were going to be paying these players. I think it was like $2,500 a month base salary at the time.
Yep.
You know, TV time, living in Los Angeles near the beach all summer. I mean, I couldn't compete with that. And so, my players were definitely going to, you know, go to CGS with or without me. And I wouldn't have stopped them. Even if I could have, it would have just been an idiotic thing to do. So now I don't have any players, basically. And number two, if this does succeed and this becomes the American NFL for esports, or, you know, FIFA World Cup, or whatever they wanted to try to build, I would be on the outside looking in. And I would have created this brand for nothing, instead of a brand moving on and becoming like the New York Yankees, or, you know, these world famous teams. It would be forgotten and left in the dustbin.
Yeah.
And then number three, obviously, they were going to pay me for the brand, and they were going to take over all the headaches of all of the nonstop expenses that go along with the brand. And then they're going to pay me for being a consultant, and they're going to pay me for running LA Complexity. So on an emotional level, sure, you don't want to sell, but as you know, in business, it's often a real bad idea to operate too emotionally. And intellectually, it was really a no-brainer at the time.
So I'll definitely talk a lot about CGS, but one of the things I heard, I always wanted to write this story, and I hope it's true, but I've never asked you about it, and I don't know why I haven't. But I'll do that now. So what I always heard was that after CGS collapsed, you went back and you rebought the Complexity brand, which of course by that point it was an asset that they owned. They'd paid for it, acquired it, and when they went bust, you went back and you handled the paperwork and the litigation, and you managed to get the Complexity name back for a nominal fee of $1. That is how the romantic side of the story was told. That you built your brand, you sold it, and you got it back for $1 after CGS collapsed. How true is that story?
I mean, it's pretty close to true. I think by the time the legal paperwork and the dust settled, it was closer to like 1,000. But it was a bargain basement price, and part of that was based on some of the DirecTV execs generally felt bad that the project wasn't working out, the economy was collapsing, and the $50 million or so had been burned through in 2 seasons. And I just think they were good guys. They knew they didn't have anything to do with the brand. They knew it was worthless to them, and they just wanted to do right by me. And we got the deal done. And at that time, I asked Jason Bass, and then at the time Alex Conroy, to come on and help me run it, because my life was in a very different place, and I just didn't want to have the day-by-day pressure and stress of running all the different facets of an esports organization by myself. See, Richard, what you have to realize is the missing part of the story we haven't discussed yet is during this time, real estate in America was crashing. Right. And I was a real estate lawyer with 5 metro offices and a lot of staff and everything else. So I went from making just, movie star money to really just going months with barely seeing a paycheck. And at the same time, I'm moving the brand over to CGS, and I'm in LA constantly to deal with all that. And, and right around the same time is when I had that Christmas Eve kind of revelation about choosing what kind of father I wanted to be. So all these kind of events were culminating at the same time, and I realized, a decision had to be made. And a long, long story short, I decided to sell my law firm. I'd brought on a partner by this time to help me run the law firm, made him a partner, and gave him part of the company. So I decided to sell my, controlling shares of the law firm to him and move my family across the country and go into esports full time. At a chance to spend more time with my family, to take Complexity and esports to the next level, and to do this TV thing and basically start a brand new adventure, which was a pretty big decision. So fast forward, I moved in May of 2008, I believe it was. The economy crashed going into fall of 2008, big time. They closed CGS in late October, early November, 2008. So in a span of less than a year, I went from owning 2 companies. Well, that's not true because I'd sold Complexity before the 2007 season. But in a span of, say, 2 years, I went from owning 2 companies with, dozens of employees to being essentially unemployed myself.
Yeah.
Because I'd given up everything back home and sold it to move out for the esports dream. And now, that esports dream was dead in the water, and I didn't even own my own brand at that point.
Yeah.
And it took me a few months to get it back. And there I'm sitting there, the first time really in my life without a job. I've got 2 kids and a wife. We're living on the West Coast now where I'm not licensed to practice law, so I can't just walk down the street and practice law. I could and I did, help out at some law firms, but still a California attorney, you have to sign off on anything. But so, I had some interesting calls with good friends. I remember a specific call with Wheat where we were just both lamenting that we'd put everything in this basket and we'd swung for a grand slam, and the ball had kind of been snatched out of the air, and we didn't even really get a chance to get momentum and get it going. And that was actually the same conversation where I recommended he start up a new talk show and keep doing what he was doing, and that turned into Live on 3. But it was a very challenging time, and the decision to resurrect Complexity from the ashes when I didn't even have a job myself was not an easy one, and that's a big part of the reason I reached out to my friend, primarily Jason Bass, who's still co-owner of Complexity.
Yeah.
Said, I want this thing to live on. I want this thing to make a difference. I want this thing to continue its place in esports, but I absolutely cannot do it all myself because it was very apparent there wasn't going to be any money, running an esports organization for a very long time.
No.
Get some help running this hobby at that point.
I think most people, having gone through that, and this is one of the things, like, I was in a very weird position at that time because, as you know, my relationship with CGS had been soured. My good friend Scott Valencia and some of the other parties, we were certainly engaging in very open hostilities at that point. And yet I knew all these cool guys, like yourself, and guys with families, like you, Wheat, and people who had really invested loads, like Red Eye as well, who'd invested loads in the CGS dream, and then literally found themselves not just out of a job, but out of a job during a fucking global recession, like the worst time to be out of a job. And like you said, it set esports back like an Etch-a-Sketch. It was just like, it's ground zero again, guys. It's back to the days of the Wild West, and you got to build your brands again. And so a lot of people at that time, I saw some train wreck behavior. Some people really didn't cope well. It was like, my life's work's over, I'm unemployed. Some people went to some fucking dark place. I mean, that's the reality. How did you stay on top and not go to those, dark places? Like, how did you stay focused and positive during that time?
Oh man, I definitely visited some dark places. It was an incredibly humbling and difficult time in my life. There was a night after the Counter-Strike team decided to move on to greener pastures and went over to Team EG. I told my wife I needed some time and, grabbed a couple bottles of Jack Daniels and basically camped out in a hotel for a couple days, half trying to decide if I was going to jump off a bridge, that kind of internal woe is me moping mentality. So I definitely went through a short, dark period, and with the help of some real good friends, pulled out of it and realized what's really important in life and move forward. But it was just a crappy time for sure. And, I firmly believe that we kind of need times like that in our lives. If things are always going our way and things are always rosy, though difficult, but they're rosy, we don't really grow and mature as people. We don't gain wisdom. We don't gain discernment. We don't really gain true life experience that can not only benefit ourselves but benefit others. And I think people that can trudge on and really battle through the tough times in their lives will look back and be glad for those tough times. I know that's me for sure. And it was a very difficult time. And I like to think that I'm a lot more mature and wise for that tough time. So I'm grateful for it in some weird sadistic sort of way.
So when the sort of decision came to you, like this bolt of inspiration, you've talked to your friends, you've talked to your colleagues, you're going to restart Complexity, the reboot's going to happen. What were your kind of priorities at that time? Because obviously, as you said, it's not going to be a genuine business for a while. No one's going to get rich off esports after the global collapse. All the marketing budgets just dried up, and all the sponsors dried up. So what was the thought process? What were the priorities for the Complexity reboot at that time?
I mean, the priorities were, I was pretty hell-bent on getting this thing back up and running. I was very, just pissed off about the way things had gone. Like you said, it was emotionally, it stunk selling it the first time. And then within 2 seasons, they want to throw it in the Complexity in the trash can. Really pissed me off. So I was hell-bent on getting this thing back up and running. You got to realize we didn't have one sponsor. We didn't have a website. We didn't have one contracted player. It was literally like rebooting from power off. I spent an average of 20 to 22 hours a day for probably 2 weeks working with people to get a website up and functional. I mean, I was literally sleeping 2 to 3 hours a night. To get the website up and functional because I was so pissed off, seeing the brand in the trash can. I was getting this website up before I even, had ink on the deal. I didn't even own it yet, but I knew I was going to own it. Wasn't going to take no for an answer. I was going to own this brand again, and we were going to rebuild it. And then, went around finding sponsors, and thank God for Sound Blaster. They're still with us today, and they came along and put a little cash in our pockets to get things going. Started, getting players. Luckily, staff was not an issue. I had some really good and loyal friends that were willing to pitch in once again for free after being paid during CGS to get it up. And, Jason Bass and Alex Conray at the time were, diving in for free and helping, 100%. And that was really a focus in my life. And I knew that the money I had in the kitty wasn't going to last forever, and I should be focusing on building a career where you can actually make money. But I just didn't care. I was like, I have to do this for me. I have to do this because I can't watch something that I built and thought I was upselling into a bright and glorious future just be thrown in the trash can and have flies sitting on it. I wasn't going to let that happen. So that was really the primary focus and goal of my life at that time. That, and as I've mentioned earlier, and had already altered my life to being more of a full-time dad and really being active in raising my kids. That didn't change. But as far as like a career or a business or where your energies go in that direction, it was 100% Complexity for quite some time.
But what's interesting, I think, is when you came back and you did that reboot, the esports landscape had really changed, like completely. Not just in terms of the finances and how easy it was to run an organization, how easy it was to get sponsors, because CGS kind of was the high watermark, I think. But also, like, new games had come out and come to the forefront. Certain other games that were established, like, Counter-Strike Source never really recovered from the death of CGS. It never quite got close to that level again. 1.6 was dwindling because it was an old game and was sort of kept artificially alive by a very passionate community. Then we had things like 2010, we had the emergence of StarCraft 2, which everyone kind of got on board with. So, I mean, it was kind of like a brave new world. And, you know, you're a guy who'd been involved, you know, in esports all of this time, already seen so many changes. And here you were having to kind of make some executive decisions in a completely new environment. So how did you make those decisions? Like, how were you sort of assessing, like, holy shit, this is completely different how it was in 2004?
It really was completely different. And on a depressing level, the game, my beloved game of 1.6, you know, had fallen from grace. In good, you know, the age of the game was definitely showing, but and then CGS came along and basically took many of, I'd say most of the top 1.6 stars. So the independent circuits were kind of falling by the wayside as far as that game went. And right after CGS died, we're talking 08, 09, there were not a lot of games, period.
Yeah.
Like, it was a desert and nobody really had any money, and it was definitely like the Middle Ages of esports in many ways. And luckily there was confluence of different things that came and kind of put it on the rocket pad again. StarCraft 2 is definitely one of them. Twitch, for crying out loud. I mean, just really catapulted and blew up everything that we've all been trying to do for so long. And then, of course, League of Legends is coming into its own, you know, very soon after. And the combination of these juggernaut games with this new, you know, streaming platform that's focused on games and in the slow recovery of the economy definitely has taken esports to a place that I personally believe is better and greater than it ever was in the glory days. But for a while there, it was thin pickings. And it was incredibly difficult because there was no money to be had for the most part, unless your name is Alex Garfield. And the guy's an amazing salesman. But even if you look at even EG back then, it was not even a shadow of what it is now. It was tough all over the place, and there just weren't even a lot of games being played. There isn't many events. I mean, there were, but when you compare it to what we see today, it literally was the dark ages of esports, in my opinion.
So I'm glad you brought up Alex Garfield, because I was going to go down a different route for the next question. But since as you brought him up and brought up Evil Geniuses, I think it's only fair that we follow up on that. And that is, you know, I know you're a fiercely competitive guy, you know, and maybe one thing that isn't really talked about is managerial rivalries. I guess if you were looking from the outside in, the perspective might be, and I'm not necessarily saying it's mine, but that EG kind of took over Complexity as the number one North American organization, and Alex Garfield sort of became the pin-up, the poster boy for successful esports management in place of you. I don't know if you agree with that. I don't know how you feel about that, but what's your kind of thoughts on the rise of EG and kind of how it ties in with Complexity's fortunes?
No, I would agree with those observations, definitely. It's funny how life works. When CGS was the end-all, be-all, and, you know, most organizations around the world wanted to be involved for the reasons I'd stated earlier. EG wasn't selected, and Alex wanted it to be bought and, you know, pushed it internally to be bought, but they only bought Complexity in 3D. So what at the time looked like, that sucks for EG, turned out to be a blessing in disguise because with this huge power vacuum in North America, Alex was free to go after Intel that had been exclusive to EG. He was free to go after other sponsors and players that, quite frankly, probably would not have gone to EG or worked with EG had 3D and Complexity, you know, still been independent and been able to choose our own sponsors and so on and so forth. So that definitely helped push EG forward in a very unexpected way. But I mean, nobody can take away from how smart Alex is and how hard he has worked. In my opinion, he is the single best salesman that esports has ever seen. And make no mistake about it, EG has done some great things and has really worked hard, but all of their success spawns from the almighty dollar.
Yeah.
Period. Alex very early on realized, if I can go out and be a good salesman, I will have the funds necessary to hire the artists, to hire the videographers, to get the best players and give them jaw-dropping salaries. I'll have, great looking website. I'll have people to help me do professional marketing instead of the volunteer stuff that esports has relied on for so many years. If I start with square one, raising money, bringing in corporate partners, I'll be able to run this thing like a real business. And it had been something, obviously, that, several of us older folks had known for a while. I just, frankly, was never able to land deals as substantial as Alex has. And his ability as a salesman is by far and away, in my personal opinion, is the most important trait when it comes to EG's success. Not taking away from his ability to manage people and to bring in the right personalities to help him grow his brand, because he's done a great job with that, but that all stems from the cash. Because if you don't have cash to pay these people, you don't have cash to get Huck from Liquid, you don't have cash to get, J-Dong, you don't get the headlines, and then it just kind of snowballs, and he's done an amazing job with it. But by far and away, the thing that has separated him from the pack, and most definitely made him the top brand, not only in North America, but in the world, in my opinion, has been his ability to raise funds and his ability to sell in the boardroom. So, my hat's off to him. He did a fantastic job.
So, would you also perhaps enlighten us a little bit about some of the decision-making process, around this time? So, during the Complexity reboot, and we've talked about this on another show. I think it might have been Climbing the Ladder or The Executives. I can't quite remember which one it was. But you talked about how the decision to get into StarCraft, you were kind of trying to hedge your bets. You were a little bit apprehensive. So StarCraft 2's out there. It's a big game. But you were kind of hanging back, like you wanted to see where it was going to go. And maybe you kind of missed out a little bit on some of the talent.
Yeah, we waited too long because we were simply not convinced that game was going to take off in the West. And history was on our side at that point. I've made lots of bad calls over the years and had lots of bad judgment decisions, and this was one of them, to where we just looked at the history of esports to that point, and StarCraft had been a big game. It was very popular in parts of the world, but never in the West, not to our audience, not to the audience our sponsors wanted to market to. So to go in and spend a bunch of money getting some stars in this game that we weren't convinced was going to take off at all in the Western world didn't seem like something we wanted to do. And that decision was the wrong one, obviously, and caused us to miss the initial wave of signings and talent in StarCraft. We were playing catch up ever since that.
Yeah, but you had some things that I thought came close to being like, this is like really smart. This is the future, like the Complexity House, like doing it like Big Brother style, constant streaming.
Yeah.
That was fucking smart. Whether it was sustainable, viable, is another question, but actually the idea to do it that way at a time when gaming houses in the West weren't even really a thing, to have one where it was fully fucking streamed was like, yeah, man, they understand the potential for this sort of idea. So why didn't that initiative kind of take off?
I tell you, Jason Bass and I have had lots of really just unique and revolutionary ideas over the years. And that only being a small pie of them. And it's been one of my biggest frustrations. And it goes back to what I said about EG, is the vast majority of things we'd like to do and know that we could do very, very well don't get off the launch pad because of cash.
Yeah.
To do things properly and to do them at a level and a quality that builds your brand growth rather than jeopardizes it costs money. Doesn't matter what business you're in. If you want to do things right and you want to make a splash and you want to really twist the knob and think outside the box, you need money. Back when I was practicing law, I wrote checks, and you could do all kinds of contests and giveaways and different viral marketing and all these fun things. And it's very easy to be creative and really get after things when you're not worried about how you're going to pay for it necessarily. A perfect example, the gamer houses, I love them. Way back before streaming was a thing with Twitch, I wanted a gaming house with cameras, exactly what you said, and we had it set up and we're doing it. But I mean, financial reality set in on these things, and if you're like, hey, we got to cut entire squads of our company to pay for a house, the house has to go. We recently had a house in Houston, but once the sponsorship money dried up for it, the house has to close. But it's definitely been my biggest frustration in my esports career, the amount of really solid ideas and concepts that we have not been able to activate on just out of pure financial, challenges and difficulties. If I had a couple $1,000,000 sitting aside that I was willing to put into esports circa 2008, complexity would look like a completely different beast. It would be much bigger, much more global, and be working with much larger brands than it is today. But the reality of the situation is money has been difficult to come by. Even in today's growth, money's still difficult to come by because there's a lot more organizations. League of Legends, LCS, has changed how sponsors kind of approach independent brands. The overall landscape is definitely better for esports in general, but it's still not easy to get proper financing on many levels to execute on a lot of the visions you may have.
What about League of Legends then? I mean, there's another game. I was kind of surprised to not see you guys jump into that sooner and maybe acquire some top tier talent, in the early days of the game.
Oh, I mean, we didn't really miss League like we did StarCraft. We've had several squads over time. It's just we just haven't been able to get a break. We had good guys and solid players that, once again, were within our budget. We had a lot of Mortis and crew that were very popular and just wonderful guys. And that kind of fell apart from the inside due to personality conflicts. Then they didn't make LCS, and we tried to stick by them in the off season, at which time they kind of imploded despite our best efforts to keep them together. Our latest round, we did our homework and worked with some really good people and brought in and hired very intelligent managers in the scene and got an LCS and, struggled the entire way along. Set up another gaming house, this one in SoCal, and did our very best to support these guys and support them while still giving them enough freedom and leeway to kind of do what they do best type of thing. And, they missed relegations and have to kind of play for these last additional spots. And once again, as with the release, as you saw at the kind of the release of Prolly and the self-benching of Robert X. Lee, there has been some internal turmoil. And,
there certainly has. And what I find interesting about this particular kind of current turmoil is it's really played out in public. Like we've seen posts from players and then counter posts from players and then a manager's posted. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I think this is almost unique to League of Legends in a way. Like everything's got to be done publicly. There's no closed doors,
Yeah, we live in a different era now. The social media, I mean, Twitter and Facebook went around back in 2004. It saddens me in some ways, but I understand it in others. And a lot of times, if players don't get what they want, they realize that fan bases view the player very, very highly. They watch the player, they empathize with the player, they feel they know the player. And the irony is the organization is quietly in the background helping and teaching this player how to promote himself, how to be more popular, how to get more fans. But and then if there's ever a crossing of opinion, the player will turn around and turn those fans on the organization and make it look like some evil empire. And whatever the player says, regardless of the veracity of what they're saying on social media, 90% or more of the fan base is going to take it as a biblical truth. Yeah. And just the organization's evil, managers are dirty, it's all shady, the poor player is just being mistreated, and you're just going to get rung through the ringer. And it's just painful to read some of these comments. I eventually just quit reading them because the ability for the average fan to be objective and be like, you know what, there's three sides to every story, your side, my side, and the truth, is really kind of gone down the toilet, especially with the rise of Reddit and in the flash mobs and the witch hunt, broomsticks. So, when it became apparent to management that regardless how much we liked Neil, that his particular personality for this squad just wasn't working out. Like it was causing problems for a long time, and those problems snowballed and snowballed and snowballed, and then everybody knows how it turned out. We didn't stay in LCS. Yeah. Different people have different personalities, and different combinations of people have a personality within that group. And Neil's personality within the group setup it just wasn't working. And we like Neil. Like, I really genuinely like Neil very much, but I'm not running a club for buddies. Yeah. I can't keep people because I like them. Screw it if we're in LCS. Screw it if we win. I like you. We're just going to go out and have fun. No. Companies are paying me money to market their products, and having a team in LCS and doing our best to create a winner has to be of tantamount importance. Yeah. And we knew we were going to absolutely be roasted over the fire for benching Crawley, even if he didn't say anything. Yeah. And then unfortunately, he chose out of frustration to run to Twitter, which, old man speech here for you younger folks is always a bad idea. Always take 24 hours, take a deep breath, and really think about what you want to say. Angry Twitter posts rarely turn out to be advantageous. But anyway, that was a side note. So he posted he was unhappy, said we were holding him hostage. I mean, he was still getting paid the same as he was when he was playing. Yeah. There's a contract there, but apparently we hold hostages now, and the whole thing blew up, and everybody's angry, and it just comes with the territory. But I love Neil. I think he's a great guy. He's an Atlanta guy like I was for over a decade, and I know he'll land on his feet and do well. But it just goes back to what brought up the conversation is we haven't had any luck in League. Could more money have solved those problems? Of course it could have. You go in, and instead of trying to build squads and try to get people that are up and coming and hungry and build something, you go in and hire superstars. If Bill Gates wanted to come into esports, he could hire every single superstar, whoever the hottest player was, Stefano, Nanawa, whoever the flavor of the year was, he'd just hire him, and he'd always have the most famous team. Thus, he would always get the highest marketing deals from corporations for his organization. It's kind of, we haven't had any luck in League, but we definitely haven't given up. We love the game. It's a global juggernaut. I've used that word so many times describing League of Legends. You look at the numbers, they play replays on Twitch that have 10 times more than other games. I mean, the guys over at Riot have done such a fantastic job, and we really want to remain a part of it. But right now we're just scratching and kicking and fighting to try to get back in.
So, a couple of quick questions, because I can see that we're coming up to the end of our designated hour, and it's absolutely flown by, as I knew it would. Trying to fit the entire history of Jason Lake and Complex into an hour was a fool's errand, I believe.
I hope I haven't bored people to death. They're probably like,
God,
why the
no.
heck did I just waste an hour of my life?
But a couple of quick questions. So just give as quick answers as you want to address. So first thing on the Prolly situation, is it fair to say at this juncture there's like no way back for him and Complexity? There's no way they can have a relationship moving forward.
From our end, right now, he doesn't fit into our plans. Definitely. For the future, the door is open for us. If in the future circumstances and rosters change and he would be the perfect fit, we would absolutely work with Neil again. I don't know if it's the same. He might be like flipping us the bird, like, I will never play. This is 2 times I played for you, 2 times that that I've been demoted, released. But no, we don't hold any grudges toward Neil, and if he would be the right man for the job in the future, I'd work with him again.
Okay. So yeah. Next quick question: the expansion tournament. Coming up in League of Legends, something of a bit of a last chance saloon to get bounce straight back into LCS without having to spend some time in the wilderness. How close are you to getting a roster that you're happy with in place ahead of that?
We're close. If I had to pull a number out, I'd say maybe 75%. We're not 90, but we're not 50. We've got Dana Flander, who is the manager of the division. Then, of course, the coach is Coops, who gives his opinions and thoughts to Dana. And then our general manager, who runs the day-by-day, feet on the ground, all operational aspects of Complexity, is Kyle Bautista. And he spends several hours a day with Dana and Coops. And the players, getting feedback on what our next move is going to be. And it's not yet determined the 5 we're going to go into this tournament with. And then after that, quite frankly, we're going to see how all the pieces fall into place around the world, see what players are available, and make possibly more decisions before our LCS actually picks up. So there's definitely a lot of moving parts, and there's definitely a lot of stressed out people in Complexity management. I keep reminding them this is not a science, boys. It's an art form. So we're doing the best we can, and hopefully we can get back in. But if we don't, we're not going to give up. We'll start over for a third time and try to get back in.
And just a final question. I know everybody. The presumption is that you're not kind of as hands-on anymore, but I know you. Like even being in the back seat, you're still fucking driving the car. That's the Jason Lake I know. So what are the plans for Complexity as a whole moving forward? Do you have any exciting announcements on the horizon? Any new plans? Any new games maybe that have caught your attention? Anything like that?
We're so focused on trying to do our best with the divisions we have right now. I don't have any exciting plans. I know I usually do, but sometimes it's best to focus on what's in your hands rather than constantly looking off to something else, because then what's in your hands is going to start slipping through your fingers. So right now we're focused on what's in our hands. We want to build this Dota team up that we've signed. We want them to be a top global contender. There's a lot of focus there. Obviously, there's a ton of focus on League of Legends right now. Would we like to get back into Counter-Strike and Call of Duty? Yes, absolutely. We're always watching. We follow all the player movements and rumors and things that are going on in those 2 FPS games. But right now we're focused on what we've got in our hands and doing the best possible job we can with it. And that's what we're doing. Like I said, I've been fortunate enough, Jason Bass and I've been fortunate enough to really find some younger guys who don't have children to chase around, who don't have careers outside of esports right now, that we trust and believe in to kind of run more of the day-by-day stuff. I mean, the manager Skype channel sits open on my second monitor all day long. I read every piece of conversation and pipe up. And when important decisions need to be done, of course, Jason Bass and I are right there. But it's not the day by day, second by second micromanagement that I did for years and years. I simply, I don't, not only do I not have the bandwidth in my life trying to be a good dad and provide for my family, I'm just not quite as good at it as I once was. And I think as we grow older, we have to be very careful to keep an objective viewpoint of ourselves. And I'm 43 now. For me to think that I can have my finger on the pulse of esports as well as like a 20 or 30-year-old, I think would be giving myself too much credit, honestly. And I think there's times in our lives when we have to be like, okay, I'm in this stage of my life. You know, I didn't find out about Snapchat for like a year after all the kids did. You know? So we have to realize that we're in different phases of our life and rely and bring on people who do have their fingers on the pulse that can help us and delegate that authority so they could do a good job to continue running the organization. And I think that's, you know, very much where Jason Bass and I are. We're involved every single day, and we know everything that's going on, but we place a lot of trust and a lot of faith in some of our younger managers to kind of hold the steering wheel, if you will.
Well, look, it's been a rare pleasure as always to talk to you and catch up. And obviously, I want to thank you for making the time. But more importantly, you know, I absolutely, I never do this with guests, but seriously, I want to thank you for just being, you know, a truly inspirational figure for me anyway, at least. I'm sure most people will agree, I'm sure. But when I first started doing this, you were one of the guys that really made me believe that you could be a grown-up in this, you know, young adults world of esports, and you bring value to the table. If I'd never come across you, dude, I might have quit before now. So, you know, certainly that's my perspective on it, and I'm sure I'm not alone. So, whatever the future holds, man, hold your head up high.
Well, thank you very, very much, Richard. I mean, that does mean a lot to me, and I mean that sincerely. On many levels, esports has really, I guess, it's given a lot, but it's also taken a lot. As you know, as anyone who's really thrown their lives into esports knows, it can really suck the life out of you.
Yeah.
And it has taken emotional tolls, and it has taken different tolls over the years. So it really means a lot to me if anyone has benefited from my involvement and my contributions. And you know, thanks very much for having me on.
Hey, anytime, brother. It's open channels.
It means a lot. So yeah, I gotta shout out.
Go for it.
Shout out our sponsors, because without them, the doors would not be open at all. And you know, we appreciate their support. Obviously, Sound Blaster has been with us since we rebooted this thing. Super pleased to work with CyberPower PC. Newegg now. Twitch is a sponsor of ours that we greatly appreciate. One of our newest is Corsair Gaming. Insane keyboard that I'm using right now. DX Racer, Scuff Gaming, and Opponentware. I would be very remiss if I didn't thank them for their corporate support, because, like I said, to do what we do takes a lot more money than people realize, and we're very grateful for our corporate partners that allow us to market for them.
Great. Well, look, man, like I say, I wish you all the best for the future. I hope Complexity is still around in another 10 years. I hope we're both around in another 10 years to talk about it.
Right on.
Yeah, man. But seriously, thanks for coming on the show. And to all the listeners out there, we'll be back next week. I did promise I was going to pull my finger out and be more regular with these. Got some great guests lined up. Perhaps not quite as great as Jason. I'll let you be the person who decides it. But don't tell them I said that. But anyway, so tune in next week for more great content like this. And thanks a lot for listening.
The Richard Lewis Esports Podcast. Taking you behind the scenes of the esports industry.